Greetings, this is Classic Games Redefined. My name's Rich, and this is the introductory video to the awaited, at least by me to get done, the Tropes versus Players War on Fun. This is the first video. It's an introduction. It's going to give you an overview of what's going on here. So I'm going to give you a flow of what's happening, explain these different sections. So we're going to take a quick look at the focus in the series, get into a definition of tropes and how it's used and defined in the series here, go into my background, and then go over the different parts of the series. Just tell you now there's 3 parts. So anyhow, let's begin with the introduction. What we're going to do here is that we're going to look at the problems with the video game industry now and play in general, the game area in general, and primarily focus on video game industry. And we'll look at the different parts. I'll explain what's happening here. When possible, try to propose solutions or ways to combat that. What you could think of the series is a mix of Anita Sarkeesian's Tropes versus Women and You Know What's Bullshit by James Rolfe. So you'll see a lot of just peeves me and pretty much doing that and try to perform analysis also on it. It's a mix of research and opinion reflecting my thoughts mainly and my perception of the world, particularly the area of video games. So okay, let's get to the following. What a trope is. And I'm going by a definition I found on the internet. So you have a trope as a word or phrase or image used in a new and different way in order to create artistic effect. A broader definition, I'm going to stick with the main ones happening here. It's a word or expression used in a figure of sense, figure of speech, or be a common or overused theme or device, a cliche. And in regards to it, that is going to be a major focus on it. That you could think of them, the tropes, as a convention in the way of thinking. When in this context of the series, the trope, when practiced, undermines players having fun. The series is going to look into practices and mindsets that are currently going on in perceptions that result in the fun, as I mentioned, come under attack. So the term the term tropes in this sense is going to be used a bit loosely in regards to it. So you could say as a metaphor or a convention. So in that sense, you can think of it as a convention. And then there's the first part of it is these conventions are what have developed by habit. And they are, with a business model, whatever else they come across, and people have blindly accepted it. So there's a second one here, which has to do with upcoming things, people with agendas. So at this point, these agendas, that twisting, as we mentioned in the definition of tropes, this twisting for agenda reasons is also undermining the enjoyment of players. And I want to look at both of these here. So we're going to press on. Before I continue going into the flow of the series, I'll explain a little bit about my background. Probably wonder why in the heck would I be doing this series, and why should you even listen to me? I admit I'm not somebody who works in the industry now, but I've seen the video game industry. I've done games for years, my entire life, since I was a little kid and was into it. I was born before Pong was made, the Atari version. Born in the late 60s, 1960s. So I've seen this. I've played video games. We'd go to a ride playland in New York, and I would play there and do these analog machines, driving games, gun games, a lot of driving game stuff they had. Also pinball. And I had stuff, and I longed for the video game side before it really got to be popular, and then Atari became my favorite company and all that. I did see the crash in the 1980s happen. You witnessed the big deal, all the video game magazines I would read through wanting this stuff here. Mainly end up doing gaming on computers, had a little bit of stuff here, had little electronic devices, but I witnessed the crash happen during the 1980s, the early 1980s. how it produced a lot of stuff that nobody wanted, quality controlled tailing off. Went through in high school, going to college, around that time, late 80s, mid 80s, see Nintendo pop up and wonder what the heck happened with the controller there. Where's the joystick? So I had that there, and saw the pad controller get introduced. So I went through this. When I was a kid, I would program games, going back to the TRS-80. Wrote some stuff in BASIC and did it that way. My first computer was an Atari 8-bit computer. So I had that. This video game industry was crashing, watching computers rise up as devices, seeing trends today happening in that. And I now do game design, or I've done game design. I've designed over 100 games, working in tabletop arena. I've hacked zillions. I've worked with different things. I have a master's degree in IT, worked in the software industry. And I have experience in this area. I've watched companies rise, watched companies fall, have a very diverse interest in what's played, and have concerns about where trends are going now. One of the things that rose up last year, which part of the motivation besides wanting to get my stuff here, is Gamergate. The Gamergate, the whole controversy over credibility of video game journalism, and the whole culture war, watching the financials of the AAA industry since probably the Xbox era, and watching and waiting and expecting the upcoming crash, which hasn't quite arose yet, but can look to possibly arise. So seeing this here, seeing the culture war, had mixed experience on the internet, played a lot of stuff. Actually, when I mentioned I did game design, I've designed a few that actually got published in a magazine. So I have this here, and I have concerns. My motivation and the reason for this series is to get my thoughts together, what I think's happening here, my perception of trends that are going on, and what can be done differently, and what we should be warned about. Why is the fun gone out? And I'm concerned. I'm looking at the Metacritic ratings. Everything's gone downhill. I mean, you have people here, and it's just the fun's. Where did the fun go? Yes, we have stuff we can do retro and everything else and find some indie area, but where's the fun on the top end? Where's the video game industry? Why are we getting bored? Let's look into that. Now, that's what I'm going to do. That's what the series is for. It's my analysis of what's going on here. And the name, as we mentioned earlier, just is a play on the words of what's happening there. And the war on fun is probably the core name, but these cliches against people who actually play. And you'll see with me, just the term player, for example. I use player, I don't use the word gamer, because I feel it's so nebulous. And we'll go into, that's going to be one of the things we'll look at. We'll look at the culture side of things, on how that's so nebulously defined. So, as far as I know, it might get moved to the business side, but that's more the financials. But let's, from this point on, let's go to the three parts. And we're on part A, part B, and part C. So part A is going to be the bad design decisions and the failure to deliver on decisions. We have a failure of vision and a failure to carry out vision. There are things going on here. In this section, part A, is going to actually look at the mechanics and what's involved here. It's not going to look into the why of it. The other parts will look into it. But it's going to be if you do this. If you put this in front of that. If you put this in favor of this as over something else, it will have an impact on the enjoyment, replayability games, and everything else in the gameplay. That's what we're looking at here. What you're doing, the execution, and the thinking of how you're going to execute, draining the life and the fun out of everything else, boredom, and everything else. Part B, I'm going to look at the industry side, the business model, the finances, from how companies hire people, who runs these companies. Why is the gatekeepers that keep garbage out? And that's one of the things that happened. The gatekeeper mechanism in the early 80s, why it crashed. that gatekeeper mechanism broke. There wasn't video game rentals. There wasn't anything else. It broke. There was no quality control. Nintendo introduced certain things that did it. But even now, we're looking at things broken. And we'll get into it. Culture War might touch on this more, but I'll mention Gamergate here. Core thing about it is the broken business model Gamergate's touching upon. The video game journalism or the lack of it. You know, those things involved here. The broken gatekeepers. And then, why? The finances, the lack of viability here, and the impact it has. There'll be, and let's get to the third one, the culture war. For lack of a better word, call it the culture war. This is the battle for identity, what games are, and what constitutes who actually plays games. And this has to do a large part with the Gamergate, the social justice warriors, as it were, coming in, the clash between them, and the professionals that do it, media types who've gotten in there, the shame of the video game industry, the very bad, horrible behavior we have on the internet. Fanboys, stuff like that here, these things. It's going to look at the identity issues and go into what's gone wrong here. That's the culture war aspect to it. The battle for the identity, what games are and who plays them. So, I'm going to wrap up now. I do want to thank you for listening this far, and I would have definitely going to thank you ahead of time if you stay through in doing this here. So I said it's going to be a ride. Stay tuned. I don't have a schedule for getting this out. My goal was to get the first video out. We got the first video out. You're watching it. But we're going on. I don't have a set schedule. I have to do more research. I have the outline done. I have my thoughts. I got to get them organized, do videos, and then there's the whole prep work. It's going to take a while. Hopefully I'll beat Nina Sarkeesian. It's going to be disgraceful if I get more videos more than she is. You look for slides you've seen here. And this is going to be basic. I'm doing like a presentation here. But I don't have a set schedule for this here. I'm still trying to finalize my thoughts on it. So, okay, that's it. Stay tuned. You'll see A1, and then Part A, Part B, Part C. And we'll have the different videos of like A1, A2, A3, B2. Or if I continue, I might go B17. Let's say I did 5 parts in A. Then B could either be B1 or it'll be B6. So you'll have an indication of where you are in the series. And I'll try to indicate when we're transitioning between these areas. And then we have Part C as the culture war. And as we mentioned earlier. But you'll see it that way. What I will tell you now, the very first video that we're going to do, which will be A1. This is video 0 because it's introduction. But A1. It's going to be on play mechanics fatigue. Why do franchises die? Why do you get bored? And that's what we're going to be looking into. So stay tuned. This is going to be an adventure. I have no set schedule. I will try to notify through the weekly updates when things are going to come along. And that's about all I can say. This is an introduction. Look for more stuff here. I am going to try to do the best I can with the performance and execution here. I'm not on a script. I wish I was, but I do have notes in an outline. I'm going to try to be organized. So anyhow, okay, you know what? We're going to wrap up here. So again, I really do appreciate you watching this. Stay tuned. Let's feel free to discuss it. By the way, in the comments below, feel free to comment on what you see here. Let's discuss this. One more thing I'll say here. You can think of this as versioning. This might be a 1.0 version of the video. And we might redo the series with update and 2.0 or do an addendum. But I'm looking to have a beginning part and a closure part to it. And I might add to it later. I don't have a set schedule, so I'm probably looking at least 12 videos. Don't hold me to that, but I know. Okay, we're done. So, I do appreciate you listening to this, watching all this. So, yeah, we're done about here. So, I do want to thank you for watching, and may your die always roll 5.